Imagine waking up on a crisp morning in early 2026 and checking your mailbox with a flicker of genuine hope. You have heard the news cycles buzzing about the Social Security Administration announcing a 2.8% cost of living adjustment, commonly known as COLA. This feels like a hard-earned victory after months of watching grocery prices creep upward while your fixed income stayed stagnant and frozen. You calculate the extra dollars in your head and imagine the small luxuries or necessary repairs that this modest windfall might finally cover for your household. But as you open the official envelope from the government, the excitement begins to fade into a familiar sense of cold dread that often accompanies these annual adjustments. The illusion of progress is shattered the moment you realize that the same government giving with one hand is taking back even more with the other. While your gross benefit might look larger on paper, the looming shadow of the Medicare Part B premium hike to $202.90 per month acts like a financial vacuum. For many Americans living on the edge of financial stability, this mathematical reality means that the celebrated raise is effectively dead on arrival. It is a cruel psychological trick where the nominal value of your check increases, but your actual ability to purchase a gallon of milk or heat your home remains exactly the same or even worsens in the face of persistent inflation. We must ask ourselves the uncomfortable question of who truly benefits from this complex shell game of shifting federal funds and inflationary adjustments. Are you really getting ahead? Or are you simply a passenger on a sinking ship where the holes are being plugged with paper promises that carry no real weight in the modern economy? This analysis is not just about complaining about a policy change, but it is a deep dive into the systemic erosion of retirement security in the United States today. We are going to deconstruct the mechanics of your paycheck and expose the psychological traps that keep millions of seniors trapped in a cycle of perpetual financial anxiety, despite the official narrative of economic stability. What is actually silently controlling your wallet? To understand why the 2.8% increase feels so hollow, we must peel back the layers of how the United States government calculates inflation through the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, or CPIW. This specific metric was designed decades ago to track the spending habits of younger working individuals who spend a significant portion of their income on technology, apparel, and transportation. However, the spending profile of a retiree in 2026 is fundamentally different because it is heavily weighted toward healthcare services and housing, which often experience inflation rates far exceeding the national average recorded by the RACtion Bureau of Labor Statistics. When the official COLA is tied to a basket of goods that you do not actually buy, your personal inflation rate becomes a silent predator that consumes your wealth, while the government claims that everything is under control. The psychological phenomenon known as the money illusion plays a critical role in how this systemic failure is perceived by the public. People have a natural tendency to think of currency in nominal terms rather than real terms, which means we feel a surge of dopamine when we see a higher number on our bank statement, even if that money buys fewer goods than it did a year ago. Financial institutions and policymakers often rely on this cognitive bias to maintain social stability, while the actual purchasing power of the dollar continues its downward trajectory. You are not failing because of a lack of willpower or poor budgeting skills, but rather because you are participating in a game where the rules are calibrated to favor the system over the individual. This disconnect between the reported economic data and your daily reality at the pharmacy or the grocery store creates a state of perpetual cognitive dissonance that leaves many feeling gaslighted and helpless. Furthermore, we must address the specific mechanism of the Medicare Part B premium hike, which functions as a regressive tax on those who can least afford it. The standard monthly premium of $202.90 is not just a random number, but a reflection of the soaring costs of medical technology and the rising administrative overhead within the healthcare industry. Because these premiums are deducted directly from Social Security checks before they even reach your account, the government ensures its own revenue stream while leaving the retiree to manage the remaining crumbs. This automated extraction creates a set it and forget it trap, where the recipient never sees the full amount of their benefit and thus becomes habituated to a lower standard of living without realizing exactly how much is being siphoned away. The system is designed to prioritize the solvency of large-scale medical programs over the individual financial health of the citizens they were originally intended to serve. Ultimately, the root cause of your financial struggle in 2026 is not a lack of effort, but a structural misalignment between policy and reality. When the cost of life-saving medications and basic utilities rises by 5 or 6% annually, while your income only adjusts by less than 3%, the mathematical gap becomes an insurmountable wall for those without significant private savings. We are witnessing a slow-motion erosion of the American middle-class retirement dream, where the safety net is being stretched so thin that it has become a tightrope. Understanding this mechanism is the first step toward reclaiming your agency, because you can no longer afford to trust that a government formula will provide for your future needs. By recognizing that the CPIW is an inadequate tool for measuring your life, you can begin to look for alternative strategies to protect your remaining assets from this institutionalized theft of your purchasing power. Let us break down the cold and unforgiving numbers that define your monthly survival in this current economic climate. If we take the average Social Security benefit of approximately $1,900 and apply the 2.8% increase provided by the Social Security Administration, we arrive at a gross increase of $53.20. On the surface, this might seem like a small win that could cover a few extra bags of groceries or a tank of gas for your car. However, when you subtract the new Medicare Part B premium of $202.90, which represents a significant jump from the previous year, the net gain shrinks dramatically. For those on supplemental security income who receive much smaller monthly payments, the mathematical reality is even more devastating because the fixed cost of healthcare consumes a much larger percentage of their total income. The mechanism of Medicare deductions acts as a structural barrier that prevents retirees from ever experiencing the full benefit of their cost of living adjustments. This is not a coincidence, but a calculated feature of the federal budgetary system designed to balance the rising costs of the healthcare industrial complex against the fixed obligations of the Social Security Trust Fund. When the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services adjust their premiums, they do so based on the projected costs of outpatient care and expensive new drug therapies, which often outpace general inflation by a wide margin. This means that your raise is actually a pre-allocated payment to insurance providers and medical institutions before you even have a chance to decide how to spend your own money. The psychological impact of this invisible deduction is profound because it creates a sense of being trapped in a system where you are running as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. To truly understand the gravity of the situation, we must look at the long-term divergence between the Social Security COLA and the actual cost of medical care over the last decade. Data from major financial institutions like Fidelity and Vanguard suggests that a healthy 65-year-old couple retiring in the mid-2020s may need over $300,000 just to cover healthcare expenses throughout their retirement. While the government uses the Consumer Price Index to justify a 2 or 3% annual increase, the actual price of healthcare services has historically risen at nearly twice that rate. This creates a compounding deficit where every year your retirement check loses more of its ability to pay for doctors and medicine. This is the hidden math that erodes wealth silently and turns a supposedly secure retirement into a period of increasing financial fragility and stress. The fundamental law of financial physics states that percentages only work in your favor when you have a significant base of capital to apply them to. A 2.8% increase on a $2,000 monthly check is negligible when compared to the rising costs of essential goods and services in the modern American economy. However, if that same percentage were applied to a diversified investment portfolio of $1 million, the resulting gain would be far more meaningful and protective against the ravages of inflation. This illustrates the brutal reality that relying solely on a government-mandated adjustment is a mathematical dead end for anyone seeking true financial independence. To change the game, You must shift your focus from the percentage of the increase to the scale of the assets you control, because only a larger pool of capital can generate enough momentum to overcome the friction of rising healthcare costs and administrative phase. The most profound shift you can make in your financial journey is to stop viewing the Social Security Administration as your ultimate protector and start recognizing it as a volatile partner with its own agenda. For decades, the American psyche has been conditioned to believe that a life of hard work would be rewarded with a guaranteed safety net that adjusts perfectly to the winds of inflation, but the 2026 reality proves that this net has become a hammock of stagnation for many. True financial security is no longer defined by the size of the monthly check you receive from the government, but by the degree of control you maintain over your own unavoidable expenses and your ability to pivot when the system fails to deliver on its promises. When you realize that the government is operating a massive insurance pool rather than a personalized retirement plan, you stop being a passive recipient and start becoming an active manager of your own survival in an increasingly expensive world. This realization is painful because it forces us to confront the fact that we are ultimately alone in the pursuit of lasting financial peace, yet it is also incredibly liberating. Transitioning from a scarcity mindset to a strategic mindset requires you to look beyond the immediate pain of a higher Medicare premium and analyze the broader landscape of opportunity costs that define your future. People who operate from a place of scarcity spend their energy complaining about the 2.8% adjustment, while those with a strategic orientation ask themselves how they can minimize their reliance on a system that is fundamentally misaligned with their needs. Buying back your freedom in the future often requires making decisions today that might look like poverty or extreme frugality to the outside world, but are actually sophisticated investments in your own autonomy. Every dollar that you do not spend on a non-essential item today is a dollar that remains under your command, working to protect you from the next policy shift or the next sudden hike in healthcare costs that the official inflation data will inevitably fail to capture in time. This is not about deprivation, but about the strategic allocation of resources toward the highest possible return, which in this case is your own peace of mind. In this new economic paradigm, you must view your household as an independent investment fund where every cent is an employee whose primary job is to ensure your long-term viability regardless of what happens in Washington, D.C. The difference between the wealthy and the struggling is often found in their response to systemic failure. While one group waits for the government to fix the cost of living index, the other group creates their own personal cost of living adjustment through alternative revenue streams and aggressive cost management. By treating your retirement assets with the same discipline that a professional fund manager treats a portfolio, you begin to see that the real threat is not just the rising price of Medicare, but the psychological dependency on a single source of income that is subject to political whims. Reclaiming this agency is the ultimate mindset shift because it transforms you from a victim of a bureaucratic formula into the master of your own financial destiny, who understands that wealth is as much about what you keep as what you earn in a world that is constantly trying to take it back. The illusion of a comfortable, hands-off retirement is a relic of a different era, and maintaining that outdated perspective is perhaps the most dangerous financial risk you face in 2026. As you navigate the complexities of modern inflation and healthcare premiums, you must understand that your perspective is your most valuable asset because it determines whether you see a crisis or a call to action. Shifting your focus toward the things you can influence, such as your investment strategy, your health habits, and your consumption patterns, allows you to build a fortress that is insulated from the erosion of the dollar. This is the moment to stop waiting for a hero and to realize that you have the tools to protect your own future if you are willing to trade the comfort of traditional expectations for the reality of strategic independence. Only by changing your internal definition of wealth from a steady check to a resilient portfolio can you truly find peace in an era of economic uncertainty and institutional decay. As soon as this video ends, you must transition from a passive observer of economic trends to an active architect of your personal financial defense by implementing 3 specific and immediate actions that will protect your household from the erosion of your purchasing power. The first step you must take if you are already receiving benefits is to perform a radical audit of your current supplemental insurance plans, because staying with the same provider out of habit is a silent tax on your ignorance. You need to meticulously compare Medigap policies and Medicare Advantage plans to ensure that you are not overpaying for coverage that does not align with your specific health needs or your preferred network of doctors. Pay extremely close attention to your prescription drug coverage under Part D, because pharmacy benefit managers frequently shift tiers and costs, which can easily wipe out your entire 2.8% cost of living adjustment if you are not proactive in finding the most cost-effective pharmacy or mail order options available in your region today. For those who are still in the workforce, the strategy must pivot toward aggressive self-reliance through the construction of a robust, three-legged retirement stool that treats Social Security as an optional bonus rather than a foundational pillar. You should maximize your contributions to tax-advantaged accounts like a Roth IRA or a 401k to build a wall of capital that the government cannot easily devalue through future policy changes or inflationary adjustments. By prioritizing these private investment vehicles today, you are essentially building an insurance policy against the systemic failures we are seeing in 2026, ensuring that your future self is not held hostage by a meager check that fails to cover the basic necessities of a dignified life. This shift in capital allocation is the only way to ensure that your eventual retirement is funded by your own success rather than the crumbs of a federal budget that is increasingly strained by an aging population. Finally, everyone, regardless of age, must adopt the rule of negative inflation by establishing an automated medical sinking fund that sits entirely separate from your standard emergency savings or daily checking account. You should treat this fund as a mandatory bill that you pay to yourself every month, specifically designated to absorb the shock of rising Medicare premiums or unexpected out-of-pocket medical expenses that the standard system refuses to cover. By automating a small transfer of $50 or $100 per month into a high-yield savings account or a health savings account, if you are eligible, you create a financial buffer that prevents the inevitable rise in healthcare costs from derailing your long-term stability or forcing you to make impossible choices between your health and your home. This proactive approach turns a systemic threat into a manageable line item in your personal budget, giving you back the power that the current federal adjustments have attempted to take away from you through their lack of transparency and their focus on national statistics over individual reality. The most dangerous trap awaiting you after receiving a nominal increase in your benefits is the seductive pull of lifestyle inflation, which often masks the reality of your declining purchasing power. When people see a slightly larger number on their monthly statement, there is a natural psychological impulse to reward themselves with small upgrades or increase spending on non-essential items that they previously resisted. However, in an environment where healthcare costs like Medicare Part B are rising faster than the base COLA, this behavioral tendency becomes a recipe for long-term financial disaster. You must resist the urge to expand your lifestyle to fit the new gross amount, because the net reality is that you have less disposable income than you did in the previous fiscal year. Failing to recognize this trap will leave you vulnerable to the next round of price hikes that are inevitably coming as the global economy continues its volatile dance with inflation and debt. Think back to that person we discussed in the opening chapter who was standing by their mailbox with a flicker of hope while holding the official notification of a 2.8% raise. That individual represents the millions of Americans who are currently caught in a cycle of hope and disappointment because they are looking for salvation in the wrong place. If you remain that person who waits for a government formula to solve your problems, you will always be at the mercy of bureaucratic decisions that prioritize systemic balance over your individual well-being. The true transformation occurs when you stop checking the mailbox for a rescue and start looking at your own balance sheet for the solutions that have been within your reach all along. You are no longer that hopeful but helpless bystander once you understand that the system is designed to provide a floor for survival rather than a ceiling for prosperity. The final core advice for navigating the complex financial landscape of 2026 is to prioritize the maintenance of your personal autonomy above all other economic goals or social expectations. True wealth is not found in the passive receipt of a monthly check, but in the active ownership of assets and the disciplined control of your unavoidable expenses in a world of rising prices. As you close this chapter of your financial education, remember that the most successful individuals are those who build their own safety nets rather than relying on the fraying ropes of a state-sponsored system. Stay vigilant against the hidden fees and systemic erodings that seek to separate you from your hard-earned capital, and continue to educate yourself on the mechanics of money. Your journey toward financial freedom begins with the rejection of the illusion and the courageous acceptance of the responsibility to create your own security in an ever-changing world. The road to financial independence is paved with difficult truths and even harder decisions. In an era where the numbers on your screen may lie, your ability to think critically and act decisively is your only true protection. The future belongs to those who see through the illusion of comfort and build their own path forward.